You don't talk to yourself because you're weird. You talk to yourself because your inner world is crowded, and someone inside you is always trying to make sense of what happened. When you're alone, the volume rises, not because you're broken, but because the parts of you that stay polite in public finally start speaking. In you, there's a critic that reviews every sentence you said, a caretaker that tries to soothe the fallout, a fearful part that rehearses worst-case scenarios, and a dreamer that keeps asking for a different life. This story is about that inner dialogue that never stops, and what it's actually doing to you. Because the truth is, talking to yourself is rarely just a habit. It's an inner relationship. It's your psyche trying to hold you together with language. Sometimes it's self-analysis. Sometimes it's self-accusation. Sometimes it's a private comfort you didn't receive from anyone else. And sometimes it's a courtroom, a therapy session, a rehearsal stage, and a lonely bedroom all inside the same mind. The goal isn't to silence the voices. The goal is to finally hear who's speaking, what they're protecting, and what they've been trying to say. It usually begins in the most ordinary places. You're washing a cup and you find yourself replaying a conversation from earlier, your tone, their face, the pause after your joke, the way you should have phrased that one sentence. Your mouth moves slightly. You whisper a correction to the empty room as if time could reverse if you say it the right way. Or you're walking home, and you start practicing what you'll say if someone asks, "How are you?" You try 3 versions. One that sounds fine. One that sounds honest. One that sounds like nothing at all. In your head, you hear their response, then your response to their response. A whole dialogue blooms from a single imagined question. At night, it gets louder. The lights are off, the day is over, and still your mind keeps talking. You can feel it like a radio you can't fully turn down. You might even say your own name out loud, half scolding, half pleading, like you're trying to call yourself back into your body. Sometimes you're gentle with yourself. It's okay. You did what you could. Sometimes you're not. Why did you say that? Why are you like this? And the strangest part is how familiar those voices feel, as if they've been living with you for years. They have. In a Jungian sense, your inner dialogue is not one voice. It's a small community. And when you're alone, you finally hear the meeting. There's the inner critic, sharp and watchful. It doesn't sound like a villain. It sounds like realism. It thinks it's keeping you safe by keeping you small. It reviews your day like a judge reading charges, convinced that if you catch every flaw early, nobody else will get the chance to wound you. Then there's the caretaker, soft, practical, tired. It cleans up after the critic. It whispers reassurance when your chest tightens. It tries to make you feel held, even if it has to do it with your own voice because no one else is there. There's the fearful one too, the part that scans ahead, rehearsing disasters the way some people rehearse songs. It believes that preparation is protection. It believes that if you speak the pain first, it won't surprise you later. And somewhere behind them, often quieter, there's the dreamer. The one who wanders into the inner room with a candle and a question, is this really the life we're living? That voice doesn't accuse. It aches. You can hear them in the way you talk to yourself. The critic asks questions like knives. The caretaker speaks in blankets. The fearful one speaks in alarms. The dreamer speaks in images. And they don't always agree. You can feel the argument in your body. The critic says, "Don't text back. You'll sound needy." The caretaker says, "It's okay to want connection." The fearful one says, "If you reach out, you'll get rejected." The dreamer says, "But what if this time is different?" Then you stand there, phone in hand, frozen between 4 inner truths. From the outside it looks like indecision. Inside, it's a council that can't stop debating. This is why talking to yourself can feel exhausting. It isn't chatter. It's negotiation. There's often a moment when you catch yourself speaking out loud and you feel embarrassed, like you've been seen by a camera you forgot was there. You might laugh it off. But your mouth didn't move for nothing. Something in you needed to be spoken, not just thought. Spoken words make the inner world more real. They give shape to feelings that would otherwise dissolve into fog. Sometimes you talk to yourself because nobody else is safe enough. Sometimes you talk to yourself because you've been alone with your feelings for so long that you learn to become your own company. And sometimes you talk to yourself because you're still trying to finish a conversation that never got finished. You replay arguments you didn't have. Apologies you never received. Questions you never asked because you were afraid of the answer. You speak to imaginary versions of people, not because you're delusional, but because your psyche is trying to bring closure where life didn't. If you grew up having to be fine, the inner dialogue becomes the only place your truth can breathe. If you learn that showing emotion makes you a burden, you become your own witness in the quiet. You talk to yourself because some part of you refuses to disappear. And yet, there's a shadow side to it, the part that makes the dialogue feel too loud inside. Because when the critic dominates, your inner room turns into a courtroom. You stop being a person living a life and become a case file being reviewed. Your mistakes become evidence. Your needs become suspicious. Your tenderness becomes a liability. You hear yourself speaking harshly and you recognize it, painfully, as a voice you once tried to earn love from. A voice that demanded you be perfect to be safe. That's the shadow, the borrowed cruelty you swallowed and now repeat inward. And when the fearful one dominates, the inner room becomes a bunker. Every imagined conversation ends in loss. Every future scene is rehearsed with the assumption that you'll be misunderstood. You become a writer who only knows how to write tragedies, and then you wonder why the world feels so dangerous. But when the caretaker speaks, you can feel something soften. Your shoulders drop. Your breath returns. Your inner voice becomes a hand on your back instead of a finger in your face. The problem is not that you talk to yourself. The problem is when you don't know who is speaking. Because if you think the critic is you, you'll believe you deserve punishment. If you think the fearful one is you, you'll assume anxiety is truth. If you think the caretaker is weakness, you'll reject the very voice that could bring you home. This is where the archetypal layer becomes practical, not academic. The critic is often the inner masculine in a distorted form, the part meant to give structure, clarity, direction, now turned into a harsh guard. The caretaker is often the inner feminine in her protective form, meant to hold, to comfort, to connect, sometimes overworked, sometimes ignored. The fearful one is the child part that learned the world can shift without warning. The dreamer is the soul part that never stopped longing. You don't have to memorize those words. You can feel them as moods, as tones, as faces in the dark. And here is the small movement that changes everything. You stop trying to silence the room, and you start arranging it. Not with a list of steps, but with a different kind of attention. When you catch yourself talking to yourself, you pause, not to judge it, but to listen. You ask one quiet question: who is speaking right now? If it's the critic, you might notice the tightness in your jaw, the way your chest narrows, the urgency to fix yourself. And instead of arguing, you offer a boundary: you can sit here, but you don't get to whip me. If it's the fearful one, you might notice the buzzing in your hands, the rehearsing, the spiraling. And you offer the simplest truth: you're trying to protect me. But you're not the only one in this house. If it's the caretaker, you let it speak. You let yourself receive your own kindness without calling it pathetic. You let comfort be real, even if it comes through your own voice. And if it's the dreamer, you don't rush to crush it with reality. You let it light its candle. You let it ask its question. You let it show you what you keep avoiding because it hurts to want. This is the beginning of integration. Not perfection. Not silence. A new inner order. Because the goal isn't to stop talking to yourself. The goal is to stop being attacked by yourself. To stop being ruled by one voice that thinks it has to run the entire life. You can imagine your inner world as a long corridor with doors. For years, you've been walking up and down it, arguing with the air, trying to keep everyone inside quiet enough to function. Tonight, you stop in front of one door. You place your hand on the knob. You listen. Behind it, there's a voice that's been speaking for a long time. You open the door just a little. Not to flood the hallway with noise, but to let one figure step into the light. And in the center of your inner room, there's a table you haven't used in a while. You wipe away the dust with your sleeve. You pull out a chair. You don't force the voices to disappear. You don't exile the critic. You don't shame the fearful one. You don't overwork the caretaker. You don't silence the dreamer. You simply let them sit where you can see them. And for the first time, the talking inside you starts to sound less like a storm, and more like a conversation you can finally be present for, like a room with the light left on, where you are no longer speaking into emptiness.